So hello everyone. Again, welcome to the top, what was formerly known as the top 10 trees in the Chesapeake Bay region, but we're now calling the top 10-ish trees in the Chesapeake Bay region. Just because after many iterations of species lists for today, there was no way we were going to get it down to just 10, and thus we have 10-ish. So we're going to talk about 13 tree species today. These are tree species that we have determined to be crucial to the ecosystems of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. With the help of Stephanie Mason, I was able to construct this presentation for you all with lots of very interesting wildlife associations, which we will learn about for each of the trees we talk about today, as well as where in the region you would find them and how to identify them if you were to stumble upon them while out on a hike. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So we're just going to talk about trees in general first and what they do in regards to their ecosystem services. So how they reduce stormwater runoff. Trees reduce stormwater flow by intercepting rainwater on leaves, branches, and trunks, and then some of that water on those parts of the tree will then evaporate into the air, never even touching the soil. And those that slowly fall down the tree to the soil will soak nicely into the ground. So you imagine how much water our black walnut would intercept before the rain was able to reach the ground. And then not only does it help to reduce the stormwater while it's raining, but when it's all done, a mature tree can soak up as much as 100 gallons of water in a day, and up to between 8 and 10,000 gallons throughout the growing season. Intercepting the stormwater also reduces the flow of pollutants to streams. Trees, as they photosynthesize, also remove pollutants from the atmosphere, including nitrogen dioxide, ozone, carbon monoxide, and then some particulate matter too that would mess with our lungs. They also, as they grow, and a mature tree has already stored a lot of atmospheric carbon, so those responsible for our greenhouse gases and global warming. Older trees store more total carbon since they have all that wood. And then as younger trees grow, they store more carbon annually than our mature ones as they produce more twigs and their trunk grows wider. Then they also are important for temperature mitigation. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but on a hot day, and the forest is nice and cool. And this is particularly important for our streams and our rivers, as the shade from trees along those waterways will keep the water nice and cool and have healthier macroinvertebrate diversity within them. So as mentioned here, riparian forests are even more important just because of how they help to mitigate any effects in the water from land use around us, such as agriculture. So at the bottom, you can see that 1 acre of forest buffer between a waterway and an agricultural setting can remove almost up to 70% of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment from those areas. And the roots help to stabilize the stream banks. And like I said before, you have much more healthier macroinvertebrate populations, which then help with our fish populations within those waterways. Unfortunately, though, our riparian forests are disappearing at a rate of 100 acres per day, but luckily the Chesapeake Bay program has had a very long program of reinstituting these riparian forest buffers. So it's just always a good reminder of that our trees they are disappearing, but we can help put them back in. And we're going to talk about why it's important to put those trees back into our ecosystems. So they're more than just trees. Our trees aren't just standing alone. They have many, many wildlife that rely on their support, on their fruit, on their shelter. We wouldn't be able to have the ecosystems that we do without the trees. They are in a forest is an independent community of plants, animals, and microorganisms. Nearly half of all known species live in forests, including the 80% of biodiversity on land. So very, very important. We had some people guess what our trees were going to be today. I think we got most of them. So this is just our list of trees. We are mostly talking about canopy trees. All these are canopy trees except for the last two. We would say that those are understory trees, and the main difference between those is just how tall they get and the resources they need to get that tall. Our canopy trees need lots of sunlight and grow way up into the canopies, over 70 feet or taller, whereas our dogwood and our serviceberry, they don't really need a lot of sunlight to reach the mature height. They grow just fine in the shade and only reaching about heights of 20 to 30 feet. So with that, I think we can go ahead straight into our tree species. I want to just do a check-in if we had any questions generally about what trees do for our areas before moving on.
There is none on the chat.
All right, then I will keep on going. So our first one, and maybe one of our more important trees that we are going to talk about today, is our white oak. Since this is the Maryland state tree, it has leaves that have rounded lobes, lacking a bristle tip, which we will see an example of when we talk about our northern red oak. So very smooth, rounded lobes around all along the leaf margin. The gray bark is very prominent, and you can see that as it matures, it will start to shred and almost peels off as it grows. And then it has acorns, many acorns. And that is very important for our local wildlife. So in Doug Ptolemy's book, Bringing Nature Home, he mentions the importance of oaks because as a result of the loss of the chestnut. Chestnuts were our primarily fruit-producing tree in the region, providing food for most all the wildlife in our areas. But with those disappearances, we have to rely on oaks and other nut-producing trees to fill that void in regards to food availability for our wildlife. So oaks are extremely important nut-producing tree in our area. You can find them throughout eastern United States. They are one of within its range, it's one of the more abundant oaks that you would find in the region. The Appalachian areas have very ideal growing conditions, but surprisingly enough, the largest trees have been found in Delaware and Maryland on the eastern shore. So if we all know of the white oak from Wye, Maryland, that was the largest white oak in North America up until, unfortunately, that it fell, but that was on the eastern shore of Maryland. It supports a whole bunch of wildlife. Squirrels and red-headed woodpeckers will cache acorns. They'll collect them and store them for a later time. In doing so, they actually help to plant many new oak trees. Eastern gray squirrels specifically could forget about up to 90% of the acorns that they hide. So 9 out of 10 acorns that they dig a little hole for are going to be forgotten about, and then they have the opportunity they just got planted basically by our squirrels, so they are able to form roots and send up a new seedling of white oak in the spring. But in the white oaks and oaks in general are said to be one of the most important trees in our area for wildlife. Over 600 insect species use oaks as their only host plant, not able to feed on anything else. This includes 532 species of moths and butterflies, 50 species of leaf miners, 27 species of tree hoppers, and 57 species of beetles. And that is not including the 60 plus species of birds and the dozens of mammals that also eat the fruit. So one example is the banded hairstreak. You would find the larvae of this beautiful butterfly eating the leaves of our white oaks until it matures into this beautiful adult. But over 500 species of butterflies and moths, and these insects and caterpillars are going to be very important food for birds that are preparing their clutches of of young babies. For example, a chickadee needs between 5,000 to 9,000 insects to raise just one brood of baby chickadees. So that's a lot of insects just for probably 3 to 4 little baby chickadees. And if you can imagine, there are many of that species of bird throughout the region. So that's a lot of insects just for the chickadees, and that's not even considering other bird species that need those insects to support their broods as they mature. So acorn,
Bradley,
yes,
we have a question.
of course.
Do you know what is the reasoning behind the deficit of white oak abundance in Georgia relative to all the surrounding states?
Hmm. That just might be a lack of data. So the lighter green it has been recorded and found in this county. Dark green means that it occurs in the state. I would say that the county information is just dependent on data from those counties. I would imagine that it's probably found in those areas surrounded by the light green. So that's my main guess for why there's the gap there, but it doesn't mean that it isn't found there.
Ginger would like to know if the clay soils have anything to do with it.
The clay with the lack of white oak,
Mm-hmm.
I would say so. I don't want to give Woodin as an example, but I know the clay soil, especially in the Piedmont range, I have seen many white oaks within those areas. I don't think it's that soil. Oaks' roots are very strong, are able to persist through that clay soil, so they don't have any problem growing in those conditions.
Thank you. That's all for now.
All right. So I will say the acorns are also loved by deer and even people. So there are lots of people who will collect acorns. They will shell them. They will leach them using boiling water. A few different iterations of boiling water, like you do about 5 times, and then you dry them, and then you can prepare them into many different goods. So when I was looking into this, I saw this. People apparently acorn muffins are a popular thing for those who like to collect and eat them. If we all are familiar with oaks, we also know that they can have mast years where they produce an extreme abundance of acorns. Usually one species will do this in a certain area. They all somehow know that this is the year to release a bunch of acorns, and we call this strategy basically predator satiation. It's similar to the cicadas. You put out so many that there's no way that wildlife can get to all of them. So you're guaranteeing that at least a few of the acorns that you drop are going to become a new tree. It happens in irregular cycles, usually 2 to 5 years, but during this time, a mature large oak can produce up to 10,000 acorns. And like I said before, squirrels will forget about a lot of the acorns they cache, and subsequently planting many more trees as they do so. And I found that Chesapeake Bay Foundation had some very specific information about how much water a white oak will intercept. A mature tree can intercept 8,008 gallons of water and sequester 2,257 pounds of carbon dioxide every year. This is pretty significant if you consider those ecosystem services. If you were to plant one, or if you have one in front of your house, you're even getting an economic value of $404 a year. So they have some very interesting information on Chesapeake Bay Foundation's website. I do actually want to mention one more thing with the mast years, and that is after a mast year, you usually see an increase in rodents. So I don't know if anyone noticed, but I saw a lot of chipmunks this year. So maybe there was a mast year last year. And if so, after the year where there's an increase in rodents, unfortunately, it has been related to an increase in tick and lime abundance in the following year. So might have to be on the lookout for that. Hopefully, we can trust in our opossums to eat as many ticks as possible. Do we have any questions about our white oak before we move on to the northern red oak?
Yes. What is your guess on to how white oaks communicate with each other for a mast year?
I don't know the specific answer to that question. I do mention a book that you can look into at the end of my presentation called The Hidden Life of Trees that goes into more of those inner workings of tree communication within a forest. I can't really speak to it at the moment. It is a pretty amazing phenomena, I will say. But if you look into that book, I'm sure that you will find an answer. Are there any other questions before I move on?
That's it for now.
All right, just doing a quick time check. Okay. So for our northern red oak, they you can identify these because of their differences in their bark and their leaf shape. So their bark is a very dark gray, much darker than our white oaks, and they have these streaks along them that continue almost for 12 inches before you see another streak intercept it. So very dark and vertically streaked bark is what you would find on a northern red oak. The bristle tips that I mentioned and the white oaks are these little hair-like features that extend beyond the margin of the leaf. So red oak group species are the only oaks to have that bristle tip feature. They can have a wide variety in their leaf shape based off of how exposed to the sun those leaves are. So this is a leaf at the top of the canopy, and this is a leaf at the bottom of the canopy with less sun hitting it. So these are even lower on the canopy leaves here. They also produce acorns, but the difference with red oak is that acorns take longer to produce in a red oak. So you'll actually have little growing acorns, little tiny ones that are in development, as well as mature acorns that are about ready to fall along the stem at the same time. The white oaks only take 6 months to mature. They mature in one growing season and germinate in the fall. Red oaks take 18 months to mature, and when they drop their acorns, they won't germinate until the following spring. So white oaks are the first thing to be eaten by wildlife when acorns drop. They go bad very quickly. They rot very quickly. But as the months move on, then animals start to look for the red oak ones because they do not rot as quickly. So I'm going to first just show where our red oaks are found. So like I said, if it's found in the state, it's going to be green for the entire state. This little blue, someone in this county has said that northern red oak is an exotic species. So some of our native trees can spread outside of the regions they once existed in, and this will happen as our climates change. But this is a very similar distribution to our white oak, except for Texas and Florida. And this yellow means that it's present but rare in these counties. So like I said before, the acorns are more loved at a different time than our white oaks. So deer that have been hunted in the winter, their stomachs are going to have a lot more abundance of red oak acorns. And this is because of a chemical or a group of chemicals called tannins. So red oaks have a lot of tannins in their acorns. It's a protective chemical. Makes them a little bit difficult to eat and break down, but it also is the reason that it's able to persist in the soil without rotting throughout winter. The white oaks have much fewer tannins and taste a lot better. It's just not as bitter. So if you were to collect white oak acorns, you could eat them more readily than red oaks. They're the protective layer of an acorn. So red oaks, because they take longer to mature, they need to protect them more, which is why they have the tannins. White oaks produce every year in abundance, so they feel a lower need to protect their acorns. All right. So in our top left picture are some very interesting features on the leaves. These are not normal tree features that you would expect. An insect was involved in making those. It's a specific type of wasp called a gall wasp, and they frequent oak trees. They're a specific type of gall making wasp that only uses oak trees. The galls are they're injected with the female's eggs, and the galls provide the shelter, protection, and food for the immature wasps. Inside the gall, the leaves are surrounded by tissues rich in nutrients. As the larvae reach maturity, you'll see small horns on the gall, and each of those small horns will be a new wasp. So they will live in there until they're ready to emerge. Yeah. And red oak acorns, they are loved by blue jays. And so the white-tailed deer will eat them throughout the winter, turkeys as well. And they're a larval host for our pink-striped oakworm, this really beautiful moth that you'll see near forested areas with oaks. And you can find them throughout the mountains in Piedmont, but they're not as commonly found in the coastal plain. Are there any questions before I move on to our next tree?
Yes. Do the galls harm the oak?
So no, the galls do not really harm the oak at all. I mean, you can see how many are on these leaves here in our red oak. They kind of stay to those galls. They don't really damage the leaf in the long term, and obviously the galls will be gone after a growing season when the leaves are dropped. So no, it really doesn't affect them. It's just, I would say that they would probably not be as browsed by deer with those galls on them. It's really the only thing.
Awesome. And one last question from the white oak. Is it a good tree to have in a urban environment?
I would say so. We have a really beautiful one at Woodend. They are able to take pressures really well. I will say that, and I expect to have a question about this, which is why I'm prepared to mention it, is that oaks in general have been in decline in our region for a while now. It's been a host of stressors, including climate, age, site conditions, compaction near the roots, and then all of these factors opening them up to disease. There have been a huge decline in oaks, specifically in urban areas, but new trees, I would say, would do really well because they're not going to be as susceptible to those stressors. But the mature ones, unfortunately, are declining in our region. So it's actually more important to probably plant them now to prepare for this ongoing decline.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So when would you say, at which age are you implying that forests are being cut but not replanted?
It's hard to say at what age. It really depends what the use of that forest is. Obviously, if it's being logged for timber, it will most likely get replanted. After that, areas that are cut down for other types of land use, like development or agricultural, it can be variable. It really depends on the area itself and how long the forest is able to be there. It's really variable throughout the region.
Thank you. That is
Mm-hmm.
all for now.
All right. So I will mention real quick that there was the past understanding that oaks don't produce acorns until they're about 40 years old. Though I have seen a recently planted, I believe a white oak at Woodend that was planted only about a couple years ago. It's taller than me, but but I wouldn't say over 10 feet, and it's already producing acorns. It is definitely not 40 years old. So if you plant one now, you may actually get some acorns earlier than you expect, which will bring many, many wildlife to your yard. All right. So now we're going to go into talking about hickory. This Mackinac hickory, which is the most abundant hickory in the eastern United States. At Woodend, though, you're more likely to find a bitternut hickory. So forest communities in our region are most generally oak hickory mixed hardwood forests. That means that oaks and hickories are the most dominant trees, and then other hardwoods, like other trees that we'll mention today, are also going to be found within those areas. So a hickory is another nut producing tree, obviously producing hickory nuts. Their leaves are a little different as they are compound. So we have one simple leaf here. This is where our bud would be, connected to the stem. And we have a compound leaf here where the bud isn't until down here is where it would connect to the stem. So it has all these little leaflets on them, usually 7 to 9, and they're very hairy, so soft to the touch. And the bark is interlacing with this nice red color underneath. A little more southern, you'll find them at New Hampshire, Vermont, or Maine. And like I said, they're our most abundant hickory species. Bitternut you would find alongside of it, or shagbark hickory as well. Yeah, so that's where you would find it. It's mostly found in the Piedmont and Appalachia rather than the coastal plain. So if you're in the mountains, you'll probably find this lovely tree. The hickory nuts are loved by many wildlife, including our wood duck, red-bellied woodpecker, red fox, squirrels, beaver, cottontail, and our lovely southern flying squirrel up here. So if any of you are familiar with Woodend, we do have our flying squirrel woods with some flying squirrel platforms. Unfortunately, there's not a mockernut hickory there. So there are baby ones, though, that hopefully will be able to produce some nuts and support our southern flying squirrel in the future. They're also the larval host for the beautiful Luna moth, and that is loved in this area, as well as the giant regal moth. The giant regal moth has a larvae that has a different name, and I will mention it later when we talk about our walnut. Yes, and many other bugs like spittle bugs and leafhoppers and some bark beetles and borers use the tree as well, and those insects will also feed many wildlife, mostly birds, with throughout their lifetime. And it is a good sap source for a yellow-bellied sapsucker. All right. So any questions about our hickory before we move on?
There is a question about oaks, though. How much sun does a new oak need?
So oaks will grow very, very slowly in the shade. They don't mind being in the shade. They just won't be able to shoot up into the canopy with too much shade. As long as there's just a little bit of sun for it to take advantage of, then it will have the ability to grow a little bit faster and a little taller. I have planted baby oak trees in the middle of our forest at Woodend, mostly in areas that do have some canopy gaps that allow light to reach in and help those oaks get a good start. But the at least in our case at Woodend, the expectation is that what's currently there now, the tulip trees, are going to start to fall in the coming years and create even more light availability for our oaks. But you could plant it in a very shaded area or in a very sunny area, and it will do just fine.
Yeah, I was wondering about moving some of the small ones that I know exist. And I hear they can be stunted too at a certain point if they don't.
I feel that they won't get to they won't get to their full mature height if they don't have enough light availability.
Sorry about that, Valeria. And Bradley, our friend Denise, has arrived.
Oh, wonderful. Let's see. I should be able to make her a co-host for a second. So I'm just going to pause. All right. Wonderful. All right. So let's continue then. Talk about another one of our very lovely trees in our area, becoming more visible as we move into the winter. They are very easily found as you're driving or walking around this area. That very prominent white bark that is shown as the outer bark peels is very, like I said, easy to see. So right now is the perfect time to be finding our sycamores. They have these very, very large leaves that come out in the spring, and throughout the winter too. You'll find these pendulous seed heads and pendulous fruits that hang on through winter. But more so is that bark that really shows off the amazing features of this tree. So again, this our maps are going to look pretty similar. It's mostly in the eastern United States. We'll have some that go up to the west, but this is one commonly found throughout eastern North America and all of these counties and states. So if you're driving around, you're more going to definitely see this tree. If you're along Potomac, you'll see many of them. They don't even mind growing in the middle of a river. You might see them in weird shapes or weird growing patterns as they have been stunted and influenced by waters during storm events, but they do not seem to mind. They really love growing right where there is that water. It's a very important riparian tree. They're actually said to be one of the most important riparian trees in our area because they readily colonize deforested areas since their seeds are spread by wind and water. So they can be transported actually in the river or a stream without being damaged. They are fast growing and they will take root very quickly. They're the largest tree in the eastern U.S. in regards to diameter, so that's lots of water that they uptake. Provide shade that cools the water that will help with the aquatic insects. So cranefly larvae are commonly found eating on sycamore leaves in the water and also really like that more cooler temperature instead of it being too hot. The roots hold the soil. The leaves have stomata which sequester carbon, and they provide cover for lots of critters. So they are a very important tree for our waterways. They are a larval host of the sycamore tussock moth, so it has its own moth that is specific to that tree. And the seeds aren't as loved by wildlife as our nut-producing species I mentioned earlier, but you'll find goldfinches eating their seeds, as well as chickadees and dark-eyed juncos. You'll also found this on Maryland Biodiversity's website. The yellow-throated warbler nests locally in tall sycamores along rivers in the northern and western parts of Maryland. So those who love warblers should also love our sycamore. All right. So we don't have any questions about our sycamore. We're going to move on to our American beech. So our American beech has that characteristic smooth gray bark and glossy green leaves that become withered and brown but hang on to the stem throughout winter. They have these large pointed buds and these fruit capsules that can be found throughout the fall as well. So they produce a fruit called beech nuts. I also call this tree the graffiti tree, since you'll more commonly see the people carve their initials into this tree, and I hope we all know that that is really detrimental as it opens it up to disease. And there is a disease going around called beech bark disease that has been known to kill some trees, and all it takes is one complete line around the trunk and you have cut off all of its circulation, so no more water filtration. You'll also notice that oaks can hang on to their leaves throughout winter, the withered brown leaves. And that's because, and you'll see that similar to the American beech, and that's because they're in the same family. The oaks and the beech are all in the same taxonomic family. All right. Also, again, really common. I think that they're more common up in the north in comparison to our other species being found along our Great Lakes and all the way up into the top of Maine. They like rich uplands and lowlands, and this is the third most dominant tree at wood end, so you'll definitely find them there. Our beech nuts are eaten by many forms of wildlife. They were the tree most associated with the now extinct passenger pigeon, and they are a larval host for our early hair streak, a very common hair streak in our area. And then it's a common breeding habitat for northern saltwood owl, one of our smallest owls, since beeches can usually have these nice openings where their branches used to be for owls to nest in. Yep, and they are even the beech nuts are even eaten by black bear when it's time to get ready for hibernation. I did mention chipmunks earlier, but want to mention them again because there's a specific statistic that I found that says that chipmunks can stuff as many as 32 beech nuts in their cheeks. So that's a lot of beech nuts for a little chipmunk. I thought that was a fun little tidbit of information. And then the buds and blossoms are early spring diet of our white-throated sparrows. And apparently the national champion for American beech is in Virginia, in New Kent County. It's 90 feet tall, 110 feet wide in regards to its crown, and 224 inches in circumference. That's a very big tree. So if you're near there, you can try to find it. Do we have any questions about our beech before we move on? We're going to go to black walnut next.
Yes, Bradley. There's a question about beech trees. Are beech trees harmed by people carving into them?
Yes. So those leave the tree susceptible to borers and pathogens that are able to get into the tree through those carvings. And also, again, if you have many carvings on the tree, and if they were just to create one continuous line around the trunk, because the live part of the tree is just underneath the bark, that's the cambium. That's where all the veins and the arteries, the xylem and the phloem of the tree are. If that gets cut off all the way around the trunk, you have completely cut off all circulation to the top of the tree. Therefore, the tree will die. So yes, carving is very bad for American beech trees.
Also, we have another question, but about the sycamore.
There's also a question about sycamores.
Oh yeah. Does the bark of the sycamore photosynthesize?
I know that, I don't know about photosynthesis, because photosynthesis has to include chloroplasts, which are, that's what makes the leaves green. So I wouldn't say at a high amount, no. I don't know any specific information, though I do know that there is proteins and things that react on bark that, trigger whether or not to grow a stem. So I'll actually say this in regards to American beech. We have if anyone knows woodend, we have a very big American beech, and it really branches only to one side. So when it was growing, it had all this light availability on one side and then a lot less on the other. So somehow the tree and the bark knew not to send out branches towards the side where it didn't have a lot of light to use. So I would say there are some receptors on the bark. I don't know exactly about the photosynthesis question. All right. Well, I want to get through our rest of our trees. I can't believe it's already 6:45. So we're going to talk about black walnut, which, like our mockernut hickory, also has compound leaves. But instead of 7 to 9, they can have up to 19 leaflets. They usually have a very small or even absent terminal leaflet, so one at the very end of the leaf. They have, obviously, our large walnut fruits that appear in the fall, and this dark, blocky bark when mature. So this is our picture of our large individual at woodend over our driveway that is estimated at 240 years old. It is abundant throughout the United States, up into Canada as well, and it's actually naturalized in some states of the western half of the country to the point where some counties and states have deemed it invasive in those areas. It is, again, abundant throughout woodend, and is found in the mountains, Piedmont, and coastal plain, and wood slopes and stream sides of our watershed. I mentioned the giant regal moth earlier. It has another name, the hickory horned devil, and it's more specifically relating to its larvae. So I could definitely see why this is called a hickory horned devil. You'll find these on the mockernut hickory or the black walnut, and then in maturity, they'll become that giant regal moth. So it's two different names used for the same species. The walnut fruits make up for 10% of the diet of eastern gray squirrels. They are the only ones really determined enough and have the ability to gnaw through those extremely hard shells that the walnuts are known for. So not only are they the host for the hickory horned devil larva, but they have their own moth, the walnut caterpillar moth. So yes, a massive tree that's able to feed multiple critters and filter large quantities of water, up to 5,954 gallons of stormwater a year. Yes. Are there any questions on the black walnut before we go on to our next tree, which is going to be the tulip tree?
Nope,
All right.
can continue.
Okay. So our tulip tree, probably more commonly known as the tulip poplar. I want to make sure to always mention that because they're not a poplar. A poplar is a name used for a group of trees in the genus Populus. So that would be like our eastern cottonwood is within that group. But our tulip tree is actually in the magnolia family. So more related to our nice big southern magnolias than our poplars. So you can see by our flower here, this is a very magnolia-esque flower. I like to say that these trees have cat-faced shaped leaves. So I drew a little example here on a leaf that I collected at Woodend. It has brown bark with these intersecting ridges that start to fall off at the bottom of the trunks when mature, and these winged fruits that persist throughout the entirety of winter. So I just took this at Woodend not too long ago, and those seed heads will stay on the top of those stems throughout the winter months as those seeds fall to the ground. All right. So this is the most dominant tree at Woodend. So it's not as northern occurring as our other species we've mentioned. The orange on the top means that it was no longer found in that particular area. But like I said before, tulip tree is going to be found throughout areas where forests were just cleared. They are a species that need a lot of light. They will not grow in shade, but once they have that, if they have that light availability, they'll shoot up into the canopy within 20 years. So they are one of the first trees that dominate areas, and because of their flowers and fruits, they bring lots of wildlife with them when they start to become abundant. They are the larval host of the eastern tiger swallowtail and our Promethea moth. The flowers provide nectar for ruby-throated hummingbirds. And the tulip tree seeds maturing in the summer, persisting into the winter, provide food for birds and mammals like our northern red cardinal. If you're at the lawns of Woodend over the winter, you'll see many birds on the ground collecting and eating tulip tree seeds. So not just cardinals, you'll find sparrows, robins, blue jays, mourning doves, starlings, and mockingbirds all enjoying a snack/meal on the lawns of Woodend. And you can find them throughout this watershed in the mountains, Piedmont, and coastal plain. All right. Any more? Oh my goodness.
Yes, there's a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any ecological significance to leaves versus leaflets?
No, I would say that there's not an ecological significance. Even within the same genus, you can actually have both simple and compound leaves. Oh man, there is in the maple genus, we have most of our maples are simple leaves, but then we have the box elder, which is actually a type of maple that has compound leaves. I don't really know what the difference between how they evolved and why they evolved, but they can even evolve within the same relationships with the other trees. So I would say that there isn't a big ecological significance. All right. So those are our tulip trees. So now we're going to talk about our eastern hemlocks. So the eastern hemlocks are evergreen. They have these small green needles arranged along the stem. And they have these small pendulous strobili found on trees in the fall. We don't call them fruits because they're technically not a flowering tree. So the strobili is the name of a cone of a pine, fir, or other conifer. And then these brown bark with thick ridges that form into these square plates. They are more northern than the other trees we talked about, mostly occurring just in our mountain regions, but popularly planted within the Piedmont. You'll find these planted at Woodend, creating what is popularly known as our hemlock grove, where all of our weddings happen. The dense stands provide an excellent wildlife habitat, specifically for warblers. There are 3 types of warblers that are commonly abundant in virgin eastern hemlock forests, specifically the Blackburnian warbler. When cubs are maturing and are around their mothers, it was found that the moms and the cubs were either near a hemlock or within 600 feet of a hemlock or a pine at any given time to provide lots of great cover, and the cubs are able to easily climb hemlocks. And then they are a larval host for our Columbia silk moth. And then the strobili are eaten by other types of birds and mammals, and then deer, moose, and snowshoe hares will even browse on the foliage in the winter. They also provide a safe haven for white-tailed deer in the winter when there's a lot of snow on the ground, since the needles will create a nice little pocket of areas without snow underneath them for deer to sit in. So we don't have any questions about our hemlock. I'm gonna just go right into our pine. Eastern white pine is a little bit different than our hemlock in terms of identifying it. Instead of the needles being arranged along the stem, they're clustered together in these fascicles. Fascicle is just a fancy name for a cluster of a certain feature. So on eastern white pine, you'll find 5 needles clustered together. It is the only pine native to our region that has the 5 needles clustered together. Usually it's 2 or 3 on other species. They're somewhat deciduous in fall, but they won't drop all their needles. They have this gray to reddish brown bark, and it's the tallest pine in our region. You'll find, again, more northern than our other species, similar to hemlock, commonly found in our mountainous and Piedmont areas. But was planted in the coastal plain for forest remediation efforts, as they are a very fast-growing tree, and the needles are very important for setting up the stage of the next stage of the forest, because they are acidic, and when they fall, they acidify the soil, and when they fall in large quantities, they do. So this will set up the soil for blueberries in the future, or blueberries that grow there since they like the acidic soil. Because they grow tall and have needles throughout the year, bald eagles love to nest up in the top of their canopy. They are a larval host for our eastern pine elfin, and many songbirds and small mammals will eat the pine cone seeds, including our eastern cottontail. So there are even some pocket gophers will even graze on the roots of seedlings and young trees. And then white-tailed deer and cottontails will also eat the foliage. Their biggest ecosystem service is towards wildlife. They don't intercept as much stormwater as our other trees. The needles aren't as good as catching water as deciduous leaves, but they're still said to intercept about 2,600 gallons of stormwater annually. All right. Do you have any questions about our eastern white pine? I'm going to move right into black gum next. All right. So our black gum is a very lovely tree here that has a beautiful fall color. One of the first trees to be seen changing color in the fall is really wonderful, striking red. You can identify them by their almost perfect 90-degree branching along their trunks. Most of the branches will be 90 degrees. Sometimes they're a little bit off. The leaves look like they're almost pinched at the tip of them. So we call this an acuminate tip. And their bark is very blocky, almost comparative to alligator scales. So again, throughout the region, and found mostly in areas along waterways. So in wetlands, swamps, and flooded forests, you'll find these a lot. You find these along the streams at Woodend. They are of special value to honeybees. In spring, both male and female black gum trees display small white-green flowers, and they're an important nectar source for honeybees. And they're actually considered one of the best nectar-producing tree species in North America. The small berries are loved by wood thrush, and those little gaps and creases within this bark are a safe haven for many small insects and reptiles, including the gray tree frog. Yes. So also the berries are even eaten by opossums too, and opossums we definitely want to support because they are one of our only mammals that if a tick gets on them, they'll actually eat it instead of just kicking it off. So very important in controlling Lyme disease in the area. All right, so we have 3 trees left. I just want to make sure that we get to all of them before we have to sign off for the rest of the day. So I'm going to keep on going, and I'll answer questions after sweet gum, do the last 2, and then final questions. So our sweet gum is another lovely tree in our area with these star-shaped leaves. They're the ones with the very, very spiky fruits that if you're barefoot and walking around the fall, definitely are not fun to find. They have this light gray bark with these deep rounded ridges, and the young stems can sometimes have these corky wings along them that protects them from being browsed by deer. So they're more southern and more common in our coastal plain. It has been said that they don't really occur as naturally in the Piedmont and Appalachian areas. You can see that the areas along the mountains are not as light green, so not as commonly found within them. But very abundant within the coastal plain. They're very important for multiple types of birds. They're also a larval host for the Luna and Regal moths, but the seeds are eaten by towhee, white-throated sparrow, and Carolina chickadees. So lots of birds are supported by our sweet gum seeds. So do we have any questions about the last 2 trees that we talked about before we talk about dogwood and serviceberry?
Bradley, let's see, back to eastern hemlock. Karen had heard that there was something that might be destroying them. Did you have any
Hemlock
information on
woolly
that? Is that true?
adelgid, yes. Hemlock woolly adelgid, and adelgid, a type of insect from Eastern Asia, has been brought over here and is causing decline in our hemlocks. It's pretty bad. Lots of hemlocks have been lost over the years. Our trees did not evolve with any sort of adelgid in this area. There's no hemlock woolly adelgid native to the eastern United States. There was no natural defenses our trees had. And yes, they are affecting our trees at wood end. Our ones at wood end are declining and have the adelgid. The Nature Conservancy, in areas where they've deemed important for hemlocks, they actually treat them by injecting them with an insecticide that is supposed to deter the adelgid. There hasn't been many reports on how this affects other insects that use the tree, but I think the more important part is trying to keep that tree there and for the long term. So we don't do that type of thing at wood end, unfortunately. So yes, it is a problem, and hopefully over time it will dissipate. But at the moment, it has caused the decline of many, many trees in our region.
And then also, Alan was wondering what are the pines that are so abundant on the eastern shore?
So there's a few. There's pitch pine, Virginia pine, scrub pine. Those are all really abundant on the eastern shore and in the coastal plain. We have lots of native pines in this area.
Oh, gosh, sorry. And someone, Jerry, wanted to know, why is it called gum, the gum tree?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. And there's other name is Tupelo, which I can't speak to that name either. I always support Latin names, though I can't really. So Nissa it's the only native gum in this area. So I can't. There's a lot of, even in sweet gum, I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it was used for a chewing substance in the past, but I can't answer that question. Common names are very interesting sometimes.
Okay, that's it.
All right,
Yeah.
So we got 2 more trees left, and these are our understory trees. So, producing some nice bright fruits. So our flowering dogwood have these nice, obviously arranged leaves. So, leaves occurring right adjacent from each other. They have these very arced veins arcing towards the tip of the leaf with these wavy margins that you can see here. Red fruit appearing in late summer, and these bark with these small square plates. Also abundant in this region, widespread throughout the eastern U.S. and is actually the Virginia state tree. It is the larval host for the spring azure and the cecropia moth. It's also especially important for native bees and is recognized by pollinator ecologists as attracting large numbers of bees when flowering. A variety of birds and mammals eat the ripe fruits, including robins. And like I said, found throughout the watershed. But you'll also see other songbirds, wild turkey, black bear, deer, and skunks feeding on the berries as well. All right. And then the twigs are browsed commonly by deer too. All right. They are not edible for humans. So I want to mention that specifically because our next tree is downy serviceberry, can also be called Juneberry, because that's when their fruits ripen is in June. So they have these nice purple to red fruits that appear in that month. These nice serrated leaves with these like heart-shaped bases, like the top of how we draw a heart, and this gray bark with these dark vertical lines. More northern than our flowering dogwood, but very abundant in the eastern United States. When these fruits mature, at Woodend we see a lot of cedar waxwings enjoying them. But the trees themselves are also a larval host for the viceroy, which is often confused with the monarch, as well as the white admiral. The berries will also feed other birds like the gray catbird, and many mammals will also eat them as well. You won't find as many species of moths and caterpillars on our serviceberry, but they do support up to 120 species of them. And it is also an attractor of native bees. Their flowers coming out in May are one of the first opportunities for bees to get nectar resources. Not as common in the coastal plain as well, but very common in the mountains in Piedmont. So those are the last two trees. I want to make sure that this stays up for a little bit. If anyone want to record some books, I would suggest if you want some more information. There are a couple listed here. These two are for identifying trees, whereas the others will go into more of how these trees communicate or how they provide for our areas in terms of wildlife and ecosystem services. So there are those there. And then my resources that I use today, a lot of the wildlife associations from Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center and Bringing Nature Home, and the maps were from the Biota North America program. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. I will take any more questions that you all have.
Not a
Just
question, but a comment. That's quite an amazing photograph.
Thank you. It is not mine. It was a free one online, and it is an amazing photograph.
May I ask a question about the last tree, the downy serviceberry?
Of course, yes.
It looked very much like the shad bush. Is that?
Shad bush is another name commonly used for serviceberry. They're called Juneberry,
yes.
serviceberry, shad bush. Called shad bush because during shad harvesting season, June is the time when the serviceberries are ripening as well. So they were associated with the timing of shad. So that's why they're also called shad bush. But there's also many other species of serviceberry. I just mentioned the one at the top of the, I'm not really sure what's going on. Oh yes, our other programs are coming up. Reminder of that.
Okay. So anyway, we had one, the beavers down, right in front of the house, and boy, the number of birds that visited it was amazing.
They are an amazing fruit-producing tree. I love to enjoy them as well. I will eat serviceberry fruits when I can, but not too many because I don't want to take away from our wildlife.
Are they edible? This is news.
Yes, serviceberry is edible.
All right.
I will always make the comment. I'll always make the comment to be 100% sure you know a plant before you consume it. But if you have, it's always just a good thing to remind. Like I said before, the dogwood is not edible, but the serviceberry most definitely is, and it is delicious.
Great.
Can I see what the serviceberry looks like?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I came in really late. I thought we started at 7.
That is all right.
I did too. I wonder if there was a mistake.
So this is some of our programs we started at 6. I'm not sure the exact reason we did some at 6 and some at 7. But this one will happen to be at 6. You'll receive the recording as well as all of my presentation slides in a final email.
Oh, thank you. I would like to look at the beginning of it.
Yes, so
Great.
you'll be able to have that.
Can I send you the email link
For
Whom are you talking to?
I'm talking to the host.
All right, I am. An email link for what? I'm sorry.
You will get an email actually with the link to the recording. Everybody who's registered for this talk will receive it.
Because I haven't received any recordings so far at all. Just let you know.
And this is Anne. Anne.
It's actually well, that's my mother's name, but I'm Eva Evangeline.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Kristen. I didn't mean to interrupt your chat.
And I'm Jerry.
Let me make an.
I'm Jerry, and I want to make sure too. Ostrov.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Let me look into that, but I will make sure. But since this one started at 6, and some people came in late because of that, I'll make sure that the recording gets sent to people who were registered for this.
Yes, I did register for it. So
thank you so much.
Yeah. Are there any other questions, tree related and all?
Yeah.
Can we see what the service berry looks like, though? Is
Yeah.
that okay?
I didn't realize that I wasn't sharing my screen anymore, so I'm gonna kick Kristen off and share my screen again.
Oh, you were sharing your screen. I saw.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was kicked off of sharing mine. When we would like to remind people what our upcoming programs are, but this is our service berry. So
I only see the map.
You only see them. Sharing is paused. Bring to share what? Oh, okay. How about now?
Okay.
There we go.
I also see your website too and everything. Oh, it's just your email. Okay.
Yep. So these are our service berry fruits. These nice gray bark. These small green leaves with those heart-shaped bases.
Serrated edge.
Mm-hmm. The serrated edge and the nice purple to red fruits in June that, like I said before, are edible.
Okay. Now, how can I tell about this particular tree, and where can I find it?
You can find it in all of these counties that are light green. So it's most everywhere in Maryland.
Montgomery County.
Montgomery County, definitely. Prince George's County, definitely. I find these in forested lands. I find them along Rock Creek. They're at Wood End. We have a few at Wood End. And
really?
Yeah. So in June, you look for these berries, and that's how you can really find them.
Now, what is the furrows? Are the furrows on the tree, are they deep? Are they shallow? Or
it's pretty smooth. They actually don't really have furrows.
Right.
Because it looks like it has furrows, but
yeah, but they're just like little darker lines, but they're very smooth otherwise.
So Bradley also shared with me that they're called shad bush. That was a common name that is written everywhere.
Yes, since they are associated with the coming of shad. When people would go and harvest shad at that same exact time as when the service berries would be fruiting and have ripe fruit. So that was called a shad bush because of that relationship.
Now, with the shad, with the shad, I presume you're talking about the fish, correct?
I am, yes.
Okay, with the shad, do they actually jump up and eat the berries?
I don't think so, no. I think it's just the relationship of the timing of each, of when shad would arrive and when the tree would fruit. Even though they were actually separate things happening, it was more so coincidental.
Okay, that's interesting because in some parts of the world you have this type of tree where the monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen it, but like the monkey eats the fruit and the fish follow the monkeys to get to the fruit where the anaconda comes.
Yeah, I have seen some of that before. It is pretty cool.
I don't know if the shad would eat this.
I'm not sure.
Bradley, have you heard the story about why they're called service berries?
I don't think so, no.
Well, I have no idea if this is true or not, but a long time ago I heard that they're called that because, as you said, they're one of the earliest blossoming trees, flowering trees for bees, and where they grow in, you know, the mountains in North Carolina or wherever. They're one of the first trees to bloom, would you say, and have berries after the snow melts. And so it also coincides with when the traveling ministers would go into rural areas and perform marriages and burials and baptisms and stuff like that.
I haven't heard this story. It's really interesting.
Question for anyone on an opposite note entirely, dealing with the ocean. Has anybody heard about the oil spill in Delaware?
No. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can.
Hey, Bradley. Bradley, could you show us one more time the list of books that you recommend?
Oh, yes. So,
yes.
Yeah, I didn't get them all.
Just a few on there, and they're definitely not the only ones. They're
I'm sure, yeah.
just ones that I know these are at the shop too. I was there taking down a list, and these are all found at the shop. So I've read Bringing Nature Home. Obviously I've used the Tree Finder and the Combinated Trees of Virginia. The Trees in My Forest one is about a guy who's very popular in the ecological field. He buys a forest in Maine, and it's basically his ramblings as he takes care of and explores the forest that he purchased. It is wonderfully written. So you learn a lot about trees with that book. With some very lovely illustrations too.
I'm sorry, what's the name of that book?
The Trees in My Forest by Bern Heinrich.
The Trees in My Forest, okay.
It's my personal favorite. I do thank you all for coming and enjoying the talk. And
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Bradley.
Thank you, Bradley.